I'm Dr. Shores, and I am going to talk to y'all a little bit about Dante, his Inferno, and the contexts of both. First thing to recognize is that Dante lived in 14th century, what we call Italy, right? He lived in Florence, but at the time, Italy was actually a bunch of different city-states, and those city-states had been at war for centuries. So it meant a lot to be from Florence as opposed to from Milan. Um, Another thing to realize is that Dante was not a churchman, and he would not have called himself one. Dante called himself a Christian. He believed in God, he believed in Jesus, he believed in the Holy Spirit, but he had a lot to say about the church's exploitation of their power. So it's important to realize that if we were talking to Dante right now, he would say, yes, of course I'm a Christian. Yes, of course there are abuses in the church. It's because of his faith and because he was in exile that he wanted to write this. And remember too, that our sample size is only the Inferno. The only part we're reading is the first part. But the second part is Purgatory, and the third part is Paradise. So Dante writes just as much about the people who are between heaven and hell as he writes about those in hell. And he writes just as much about people who are in heaven as those who are in hell. So while you're reading, it's really, really easy to think that like medieval Florence was just this horrible place and that everyone was a hypocrite and that no one was worthy of salvation. And that's not what Dante believed. So here are a couple of things I want to talk to you about. The first is the influence of St. Augustine, who wrote in the 4th century, The City of God. Now, St. Augustine said that basically he imagined two cities. One city was the city of God, and the other city was everything else. So when Dante is imagining hell as a city, that is a direct response to Augustine's work 1,000 years before Dante, who imagined Rome and like the wider world as this bad city, and then imagined heaven as the city of God. Another important thinker for Dante was a man named Thomas Aquinas, and he was much more temporally close. So he wrote in the 13th century. He wrote in the 1250s-ish, and he had a lot to do with integrating logic from ancient scholars with the discussion of Christian literature. For instance, Thomas Aquinas helped us understand how using the process of logic can help us get to deeper truths within biblical and apocryphal texts. So that's something to bear in mind as well. I'm going to leave it at that for now. Thanks.